Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. In a spiritual place, we need to lift the vibrations for our medium because we need that energy for meeting. Well, today I had to kind of change my talk a little bit. I was going to start because we are being recorded, and so we have to be careful if we are involving other people's names. And coming here today, I nearly missed the freeway. I was miles away, and I've just noticed I bought the wrong glasses. So it's one of those days, and I hope you don't mind that I've left my mobile on because my daughter-in-law is due to go in a minute. She's having a baby. I'm not go with. So I hope you will excuse me. It won't go as I've told Spirit, not my own here. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this philosophy of ours, this spiritual philosophy, this wonderful, wonderful philosophy, it has many facets to it. Unfortunately, nowadays we seem to get people that just want to go to development circles, want to be a medium, and they think that's all the philosophy is. But believe you me, it's a lot deeper than that, and there's a lot more to it than that. It's a way of life. And you know, all of us from time to time have moments in our life when things don't seem to go right, or we feel that we don't know where we're going, or if we want to go there at all. And I'm no exception, and that's the way I've probably felt the past 18 months. I've said to my friends, I feel like giving it all up. Giving it all up, giving it all away. Cancelling all my bookings. I even thought that before Christmas. I didn't know what was wrong with me. But we all go through that. And some do say it's a thing called AGE, aging, which I can accept as well. But anyway, I've been feeling this way for quite a while, and I couldn't seem to lift myself out of it. And then, a couple of weeks ago, I was really, I just didn't know what to do, who to turn to. You know, and I talked to my friends. My daughter felt I was going a little bit introverted, and, you know, Mum, what are you doing? And a friend rang me, and her mother passed into spirit before Christmas, and she gave me one of the spiritual books. Only about 200, which I'm trying to go through. And then she rang me the other week and said, would your grandson like my books? My grandson is 25 and he's very interested. He has no mother. She died when he was a young child. And I said, I'm sure he would. So she will give him what he thinks he wants and you keep the rest. So I thought she had a few books and she brought them along and I had to help her out the boot. So again, I have 150 to 200 books, which are all now in my library office. And so I started going through them. I told my grandson to pick what he wanted. And there are so many out-of-print books. Absolutely wonderful. And I picked up a book and I said to him, this would be good for you. I read a couple of pages, but I'd like to read it first. I'm not a great reader. I do read about our mediums and on the spiritual philosophy. But other than that, I never pick up a book. And I started to read this book on Thursday evening. My daughter said, she's taken it home yesterday. She said, it must be good, Mum, if you've studied your race in 2 nights. And I have never been so inspired by a book as I have by this book. It wasn't a spiritual book, although when you go through it and you read the contents of it, it's very spiritual. If you can get your hands, I've looked this up on the internet. It's a sort of an old book, about 17 years old. I think they're only a couple of dollars. And it's called Tuesdays with Murray, M-O-R-I-D, by Mitch Appleton. You've read it? You've heard it? A bestseller, of course. It's inspired me so much that reading this book about this man that's dying, not long to live, and it goes through his life, it calls us all. You know, and he said, when we learn to die, that's when we learn to live. And he said to his tutor, who wrote this book eventually, years later, when he was older, when he first went into the class in the university and he saw this little man there, he didn't know if he'd gone into the right class, and should have gone into this. And he said to his students, there was about 16 of them, I want you to write about the meaning of life. That's what he said to them. And we'll come back to that later. And so I read that book, and it inspired me and lived in me. And I started to think, the week Jan rang me about these books, I also got a wonderful email the same day from Stuart Alexander, who is, as you know, the first comedian in England that I've sat with many times. A wonderful email. I won't tell you the contents, it's really recorded, but that lifted me. And then that evening there was a phone call from a gentleman who'd been given my phone number before Christmas, not with my authority, but he was very concerned about his son, very concerned about spirits, he thinks it's spirits acting on his son. And I thought, isn't that strange, the way I'm feeling? And yet, is this spirit giving me a push and saying, look, you know, get on with things, stop noticing around. And so I thought a little bit that way over the last couple of weeks, although I feel a little bit, I couldn't sleep because I didn't know how to answer this email from this young man. It was very difficult. And then I suddenly, because I hadn't slept for 2 weeks, I sat down on Thursday and I wrote this letter to him and passed it through a friend who was doing apologies. And she said, what a kind letter, what a kind and spiritual letter. I said, well, that's come from spirit because I've just sat on the time passed. So this gentleman that was dying, one of the things he said is that life, we need to look at life. And we need to find a meaningful purpose. Something that we know we can go on when we pass to the spirit world. We'll think, well, we haven't done a bad job. Maybe we've helped a few people. And so then last night, after my daughter had gone, and I told her about this book, which she took a little taken with her, I picked up a book called On the Edge of the Unknown by Arthur Conan Doyle. Has anyone here read it? Great book. Great book. All his books are great, his spiritual books. And I thought, well, isn't that funny? I've been thinking of late of my life, going over my life, from the hauntings, and the phone calls I've had, the letters I've had from people thinking that the houses are haunted, the houses I've been to clear or to see if they need clearing, the experiences I've had. And I picked up this book, and the first chapter was all about Houdini. A lot I didn't know, most of it I didn't know about this man. And then the next chapter was about the shadow screen. He called them the shadow screen. I think it was the shadow screen. And it intrigued me because we never know it all. We are learning day to day. And no matter what we learn, we may learn today, something may change our mind tomorrow. And I thought, what a wonderful way Arthur Conan Doyle explained about some of the hauntings. Very simple, very simple. A lot was I have said, but the way he put it all those years ago was absolutely wonderful. So maybe I will share some of that with you today. I've jotted a few notes down in case I tend to go off the trail, because I know we don't have that long to talk. Arthur Conan Doyle spoke about a lady that went to see her friend in the hospital, a matron. And she knocked at the door and went into the room. And the nurse, as she walked into the room, she got a feeling of disaster, a feeling something was wrong. So she walked in the room. And then the nurse came along and said, oh, Mrs. Spencer's not here. She's had to go out. And she said, she's had bad news, hasn't she? And she said, yes, she has. So Arthur spoke about this lady picking this up, and that was the start of his chapter. And excuse me, gentlemen, if you know, you've read this book, you will know what I'm talking about. So he said, why is it that when we walk in, she walked into that room and she had this feeling? Is it telepathy? Is it telepathy that she walked into that room and had this feeling? And he says, if it is telepathy, then if not only it stretches, the thought stretches from brain to brain, an emotion not only flash from brain to brain, but that it can remain stationary for an hour and then impress itself upon any sensitive who approaches it. You don't always have to be sensitive. The more sensitive you are, someone may have walked into that room that was very sensitive and could possibly have had a flash and actually seen someone. Well, the more sensitive, when the sensitive approaches it, it picks up. They can pick that up. He said, but if not for an hour, why not for a year or for a century? And that really made sense to me. It started to make sense when I was reading it. And he spoke of a friend that bought a house that was a century old, 100 years old. And his wife was quite sensitive. Each time she went down the stairs, she had the feeling of being pushed. And it was always on the same stair. And as Arthur Conan Doyle says, some people might say, oh, goblins, something's happening, coming every time to push you. Which is ridiculous. But his theory, and it's a theory that sits well with me, it's a theory that I've always thought is that the way he put it was very good, and I'd like to explain it. He says that the startled woman, the mind of that startled woman, as she felt herself falling, being pushed and falling, left some permanent effort behind in which could still be discerned in this strange fashion. But on what could this impression be left? An impression of such a nature as this becomes a material thing, which implies a material bond or link, however subtle. He said, so let's take what is there. We have air and we have ether. And if you look at ether, it's very complex. So I'll go with the esoteric if there is a thing like this. And he says air is a mobile thing and could not carry any impression at all. Ether, it is said, is a mobile thing, but it is pictured as a most delicate medium with vibrating currents flowing in it. And if we conceive the whole material universe is embedded and interpenetrated by the subtle material, which would not necessarily change its position, since it is too fine for wind or any coarse of material to influence it. Therefore, do we have a permanent screen on which shadows are thrown? The block of ether, such as the block of ether on the stairs, is the same that it always was, and so conveys the impression from the past. Now this would explain many things, and so why many grown men would be terrified in certain localities without being able to give any reason, such as we read about battlefields, where they see armies, the impression of armies going through terrible battles. And sometimes many people, even if you're not as sensitive, feel a gloom when they walk in a certain place. This made sense to me. This resonated well with me. So what he's saying is the impression of that lady falling, that lady that fell. It's just that impression that's left behind, and it's in the ether, it doesn't move. It doesn't matter if it's 100 years on. That impression will still be there, and that's what the sensitive, the lady that's a sensitive, is feeling. Does that make sense? That makes sense. Right. So I'll give you an example what I thought of. Many, many years ago, in Liverpool, there was an area called the Murder Mile. There was 3 terrible murders. And one murder, a man had murdered his wife, who was 8 months pregnant, and his mother-in-law. The brother was out of work, so he escaped. He then went to the pub and shot himself. This was one that came in the Murder Mile. That was when I was a kid. Many, many years later, the house next door but one, my husband's auntie lived, and she was best friends with these people, phenomenal. And she found them. Many years later, my husband's sister, who very young, not a baby, she was about 17, and her husband was in doing his national service. And the house came up to rent. The brother had stayed in the house all those years and had to go into a home, he was sick. And so she got the house to rent, which I couldn't believe. I could not have gone in. I could not have lived in it. Anyway, we were all summoned to go and paint, help her to paint. So we go down, I was about 21 years old. We go down on our motorbike and we go to clean the house. The others were all there. And I don't know, if you're English, you will know what a vestibule is, or you're not. A vestibule is a front door and then a small gap and then another door into your hallway. That little area is called a vestibule. It's only a few feet. So my husband went in. I went through the front door. I was only 21. I couldn't get any further. It was like a wall. I couldn't get any further. It was a wall. And I said, I'm going in. He said, you've got to go in, you've got to go in, you've got to go in. You know, I said, I can't come in. I went to sit back on the motorbike. So he went to tell them I couldn't come in. Of course, you know, I was the silly one. So I did try again another day, and the same thing happened. So I could not understand it. I didn't understand all about hauntings, although I'd had it right from a child. And I thought, well, you know, she's learned it in the kitchen, blah, 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 blah. It was some years later when the Liverpool Echo decided to reprint all these murders in Liverpool. Wonderful thing. But anyway, she was murdered in the kitchen at 8 months pregnant. But her mother-in-law had run to get away, and he got her in the vestibule, and that's where she was murdered. So you see, that made sense then to me, that she's not there, but that impression of that terrible moment, that emotional crisis is still there, no matter how old the house is. And then, as we say, feelings, you don't have to be sensitive to feel that there's something not quite right. My own husband, we went to visit friends here in Australia many years ago. They'd moved house, and my friend, the other friend, I said, "We need to see it." Yes, he went, "I'll be interested to know if you the house." I didn't like the house. I didn't like the house. They never liked the house until there was a tragedy in the house and the house, you know. And we came out, and as we came out, my husband showed, "This all was scared. It had nothing to do with the philosophy." He said, "I didn't like it in there." I said, "Why?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I couldn't get out quick enough." Now, he wasn't sensitive, but he had that feeling, and I think the feeling was right. Not long after, in the house, or something, suicide. So that is just an example of what Conan Doyle was saying. And another example, I'm giving these examples because I'm sure through life you may have had these experiences, or if you do, it helps you to understand them a little bit more. When I moved into my home in Old Main Road in Fairley Creek, which I've now moved out of, I'm in a small place. Well, there, I have told this story many times. We'd only been in a few days, moved in, renovated, moved in, and we heard the sound of the back door going. Although it was the back door, we used it as the front door, everyone came down there. There was no one there, we heard footsteps coming through the family room. And then my grandson came out to stay, and he got up in the nice and nice, footsteps. I said, "What's up, Grandpa?" He said, "Yeah." And so I told the girls in the group, you know, last group, and they just laughed. And then one day, one of the girls was in my library looking for a book, to borrow a book, and it happened to the door, and he heard the footsteps, and she went out. She said, "My goodness, is that what you hear?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Yeah, in this place." I said, "I just know. No harm." A few days later, I was looking through the books, and the same thing happened, and I must have turned so quick, I saw this gentleman walking through in brown clothes, shed, rolled up, little gentleman, grey hair, shuffling through. And because a long story short, he became part of the family. But he was the farmer. This was the original farmhouse that we had. It was an old house. And that's the way he must have come in. because although we were 3/4 of an acre, he used to own all the land around. He was the main potato supplier in Victoria. And so that must have been the way he came in from the land, probably tired, and that emotion somehow, that had been left behind. And I was picking that up, not only me. We sold the house. The house was sold 3 years ago in June. And the people didn't want to move in right away. They wanted to rent it for 2 years. And the people that moved in turned out they knew my daughter-in-law. They only knew me, and they went over to her and they said, "Could you tell us, do you know if your mother-in-law felt anything in that house?" And she said, "Well, actually she did." She said, "Why?" She said, "Because we heard the door going, and we heard footsteps going through the house. It's terrified us, absolutely terrified us, and we hear it sometimes in the middle of the night." So she laughed and she said, "Don't be afraid. It's only the old farmer." She said, "I can describe him for you because my mother-in-law saw him." So you see, it's still there. It's not me. It wasn't me bringing it. It's still there. It's an imprint on the house. So that was just another example. And another example, 5 minutes. Another example, many years ago, and I have said this again, you may have heard this story. We went to stay, we went home from New Zealand, that's where we lived. And we went to stay with friends we'd met and also immigrated to New Zealand and back to England. And they got this beautiful cottage. It was 2 cottages made into one, Forest Resort Cottage in one, right on the edge of the Queen's estate. It backs on to the Queen's estate. And very low, typical cottage, stone cottage, very low. Anyway, we go there, and the first night, because it was 2 cottages, we went upstairs that, and that's where they went up, and we went upstairs that way, because that was originally the cottage. So you had 2 bedrooms, and then 2 bedrooms. So we go to these stairs, and the kids were in 1 bedroom, the 3 kids were in 1 bedroom, and we went in this other bedroom, and there was 2 single beds, and I mean 2'6" beds, little single beds like this. And I'm here, my husband's there, and there's a wardrobe open with a curtain. It was not the kids. That night, I had a dream. Well, I thought it was a dream at first. And in the dream, I saw this woman in a long black dress, a little frilly apron, frilly cap, big one. And I don't know if I came out of the dream, I don't know what. But I opened my eyes, and she was standing at the bottom of the bed. And she came right through, and into this opening. Well, I jumped out of that bed quicker than anything. I'd have won any competition for speed. I jumped in bed with my husband, and he spot on. So he said to me, do not tell them. Do not tell them. He said, do not tell them. He said, I'll really be angry if you tell them, because you're terrified. So I couldn't tell them. But the next night we went to bed, we must have wondered what was going on with the noise. That night, I stayed in his bed, and he said, you can't, 2'6". I said, I'll get in by the wall, I won't move. And I squashed myself against the wall so he didn't throw me out of bed, because I was so scared. So the next night, we pulled the beds along, we must have wondered what was going on, and put the 2 beds together, and I slept the other side, and he slept that side. Now that was an impression. 4 years ago, I lost touch with them years, that's many years ago. I caught up with them because I go to Norfolk. And I went to see them, and the daughter bought that cottage. She was an only child, died, and she moved into our mother's cottage when her mother died. And so a daughter bought the cottage. So we were sitting, I went to see it. But we were sitting talking, and unfortunately she had cancer, she did die. And I said, did you ever see anything in that cottage, or feel anything? And she said, why? I said, well, I was forbidden to tell you. I said, Ray will never let me tell you. And she said, well, before I tell you, yes. Before you tell me, yes. She said, my daughter's in there, and there's one room, no one was sleeping. And she, the children, none of them were sleeping even growing up. So I said, was it on the left? As you go up the stairs, the room on the right? She said, yes, the one you stayed in. So I said, well, tell me what they see. And she described that I had seen the woman. the same thing all the time, they see. And she said they've had visitors and they put them in that room and they see it. She said, so they don't use the room at all. So you see, that lady, evidently she did come from the royal estate. She was probably a chambermaid or whatever. And these were the Forrester cottages. These were cottages that were let out to the people, to the royals, that were the royals years ago. And so that woman evidently probably lived there and maybe didn't like the idea of someone else being in the house. That's just another example. And so he goes on to say, if you compare this to an onion, we do believe that we are form within form. And I thought it was great the way he compared us to an onion. I've been compared to an onion before. But he said, like the layers of an onion, the skin of an onion can be peeled off. And you may as well look at us like that. And that leaves an impression when there's been an emotional crisis. But that onion goes on, because there's many layers to it. And that goes on through life. And that can leave these layers as you go through life. Now that made sense to me. And I'll have to skip what I was going on because I want to get this bit in. So that takes us to thought form, which I always go on about. Most hauntings are thought form. 85% of hauntings are thought form. Some are not hauntings at all. It's the imagination. Fear builds up in our mind and we can imagine it. And we hear about earthbound spirits, and I've heard it said there are no earthbound spirits. I don't agree with that. And listen to him. He quotes a house, a manor house, the Radhurst Manor House, near Lee in Kent. And in 1857, a British general and his family moved in, and they heard noises and happenings in the night. It scared them. And then a clairvoyant friend visited the couple. And what she saw was an elderly couple. And they spoke to her, being clairvoyant. She could hear them. It's more common to feel than hear, and then it's more common to hear than see. So she could hear this couple as they spoke to her. And they told her that this was their place, and they'd done a lot of renovations, and they were angry to see it in the hands of strangers. So they had been so connected to that place, wouldn't let go to that place. They'd been so connected, they were still around. They were still hanging around that place. Part of them was still hanging around that place. They hadn't moved on. They wanted to be there. They didn't want to leave the home. They did check out what the clairvoyant had said, and they couldn't find the name. She saw over them. She saw the name Children over, that was the name, and they couldn't trace it. They said, "Can you remember anything else?" She said, "Well, remember the name, I got the name Richard in 1753, so that gave them something to go on." And they found there was a Richard Children, that was his name, Esquire, had lived in the house in 1753. So you see, the impression of these people, they didn't want to let go of the home. And so very, very quickly, I can give you an example of that. And this is why I'm saying this. Many years ago, there's a medium, I believe she's still around, I haven't been in touch with for many years, Joan Fowler. She was up here, she was for many, many years. Joan was a brilliant medium. Many years ago, long time ago, I had a phone call, would I go and play that house? And I'd never done anything like this, believe it or not. Get friends, people. Cut the long story short, in the end, I decided to go. And it was in Kew. And I asked Joan, would she come with me? So she went, I'll bring one of my students, so I'll bring someone as well. So the four of us go to Kew, and I told her before, because it was funny. We're in Kew with all these big tall houses. So we're in this road, and she said, oh, we really don't know what we're going into. Maybe we'd better say a prayer before we go in. So we stood round the lamppost saying a prayer. If anyone had come out and seen us, we could imagine what they'd have thought. So we went into this house, and it was beautifully renovated. And so the lady had explained to us why they couldn't sell the house, they couldn't hear what had been happening in the house. And so we went through the house, and there was just one room that hadn't been renovated. And as we walked down the hallway, feelings, we walked down the hallway, and it was like walking into a block of ice. That side was the kitchen, this side was a room that had a lot of junk in it. It needed the last room to be renovated. We went in the kitchen, we felt nothing. We went in the bedroom, we felt it. We felt it. And as I walked in, I saw a gentleman standing on the floor. We said a prayer, and we started talking to whoever was there. And then we picked up that elderly lady. And she was quite rough. We all linked one another, and she pushed us, and she pushed us, and she pushed us. And Joan said, keep your footing, which we did. And, Joan said, look, if you don't go, these people have done wonders with this house. They're not going to harm the house, but they'll sell it, and many people end up appreciate it. And then I could see this man, he was standing in the corner just looking at him so sad. And I said, your husband is there. He's waiting for you. I said, he's waiting for you. Go to him. So we talked, for half an hour we were talking. And anyway, they ran this is wonderful, very successful. But you see, I believe that she was hanging on to her house, exactly what Conan Doyle was saying. I believe this lady was hanging on to her house. She didn't want to go. She didn't want to renovate it. She didn't want to go because it was her house. I have to finish, and so I'm not to finish. So I can't go on with the rest, maybe another time. I love talking on nonsense. I really love it. And so this gentleman, back to this gentleman who was dying, who did die. When he asked the student, when he first started university, the student that was going to be famous worldwide, played the piano. By the time he was 30, he realised he wasn't going to make it. He was playing at the bars and clubs, but he became a well-known journalist. He said to him, the next but last time before we saw him, perhaps I couldn't talk after that, it's about the minute before he died, I was on oxygen. He said to him, if you had your life to live again, would you do the same? Would you be exactly the same and do the same things? He said no. He said no. Learning to die, I've learned about living. He said I wouldn't bother about issues, about the big house, about the best car, the best phone, well I'm too thin, well I'm too fat, wouldn't bother me. He said, what we need to do is to love. And right through the book he says love is the greatest thing of all, which I always say, is to love, be respectful, forgive others and forgive yourself, to live your spirituality and your awareness. And then he gave a little smile and he said to the guy, the students, and he kept trying to give him a little smile, and he said, that is the meaning